In biblical days, significant contributions flowed into the Jerusalem temple as a result of the obligation of the people of Israel to present tithes of their crops and their increase in flocks and herds. I'll repeat that. In temple days, contribution flowed into the Jerusalem temple as a result of the obligation of the people of Israel, the Hebrews, to present tithes of their crops, increase of flocks and herds, not money. I'll focus on that very soon. The Hebrew number 10 is pronounced Eser. The tithe of Israel was termed Maaser. That is where the name tithe comes from the Hebrew word 10, Eser. Tithe is Maaser in Hebrew, and it was one of the many designations for contributions to the temple. If you read Deuteronomy 12:6, there are many contributions that Israel was supposed to bring to the temple, and Maaser, which is the tithe, was one of them. Deuteronomy 12:6 reads, "And there you shall bring your burnt offering, and your sacrifices, and your tithes, and the separation of your hands," which is your contributions, "and your vows, and your donations, and the firstborn of your cattle and of your sheep." Notice here in this verse, it listed tithes among the various types of ceremonial offerings. As you see here, there were multiple types of offerings. You had the burnt offering, you had the sacrifices, you have the heave offerings, which are your donations, you have your vowed offerings, you had your free will offerings, and then the firstborn of the herds and flocks. Tithes are mutually exclusive to these offerings, meaning they are not the same. Tithe is the tenth of. Tenth of what? Not money. Can we prove that? Of course we can. Scriptural tithing was only intended for a society sustained almost wholly by agricultural crops and animal herds. Scriptural tithing was only intended for a society sustained almost wholly by agricultural crops and animal herds. In Leviticus 27:30 we read, "Any tithe of the land, whether it be from the seed of the land or from the fruit of the trees, it is Yahweh's. It is holy to Yahweh." Leviticus 27:32, "Any tithe of cattle or flock, of all that pass under the rod, the tenth shall be holy to Yahweh." Deuteronomy 14:22, "You shall tithe all the seed crop that the field gives forth, year by year, and you shall eat before Yahweh your Elohim in the place he chooses to establish his name therein. The tithes," pay attention, "of your grain, your wine, your oil, and the firstborn of your cattle and of your sheep, so that you may learn to fear Yahweh your Elohim all the days." Nehemiah 10:37, "And the firstborn of our sons and of our animals, as is written in the Torah, and the firstborn of our cattle and our flocks, to bring to the temple of our Elohim, to the priests who minister in the temple of our Elohim. If you paid close attention, you will notice that the tithe that God wanted was not from money. He wanted the tithe from the land, animals, and birds. Now, one may argue that money was not universally available and that barter trade or the barter system must have been used for most transactions. A lot of people say that. A lot of pastors say that. Back then, they did not use money. They did barter trade. That is why animals and crops was required. But now, we have money, so we use money. That is not accurate. And this argument is not biblical. Anybody who makes such an argument hasn't read their Bible. Because many centuries before Israel entered the land of Canaan and began tithing food, money was an essential everyday item. I'll repeat that. Before the Hebrews got into the land of Canaan and began tithing food, not money, food, money was an essential everyday item. And I give you several examples. In payment for slaves. In Genesis 17:12, this is what God tells Abraham. And at the age of 8 days, every male shall be circumcised to you throughout your generations. One that is born in the house, or one that is purchased with money from any foreigner who is not of your seed. So clearly we see that money was being used in buying of slaves. We also have in scripture money used in purchasing of land. We see that in Genesis 23 verses 9. And he spoke with them, saying, If it is your will that I bury my dead from before me, listen to me and entreat for me to Ephron, the son of Zohar, that he may give me the Machpelah cave, which belongs to him, which is at the end of his field, for a full price. Let him give it to me in your midst for burial property. Abraham paid a lot of money to buy burial property to bury his wife Sarah. This is before tithing was instituted for the nation of Israel. He's asking them to pay full price, which he does. He paid 400 shekels of silver. We see that in verses 15. My Lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. That is how much he paid. So money was being used way back in the times of Abraham, before the institution of the tithe to Israel. We also see money used in payment of vows. Leviticus 27. Let's read from verses 1 to 5. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, When a man expresses a vow pledging the value of lives to Yahweh, the fixed value of a male shall be as follows. From 20 years old until 60 years old, the value is 50 silver shekels, that is money, according to the holy shekel. And if she is a female, the value is 30 shekels. So clearly we see that money is being used in the payment of vows. We also see that money is used in payment of dowry. Deuteronomy 22 verses 29. The man who lay with her shall give 50 shekels of silver to the girl's father, and she shall become his wife, because he violated her. He shall not send her away all the days of his life. It's talking about having relations with somebody's daughter before you marry her. They fine you, you pay dowry, and that was money. So clearly, money was being used way before tithing was instituted for the nation of Israel. And even when it was instituted, money was still being used. But yet, God says, I don't want money when it comes to your tithe. I want your food. I want your crops. I want your animals. Now let's put the icing on the cake. Deuteronomy 14:23 to 26. You shall tithe all the seed crop that the field gives forth, year by year. And you shall eat before Yahweh your Elohim in the place he chooses to establish his name therein. The tithes of your grain, your wine, and your oil, and the first fruit of your cattle and of your sheep, so that you may learn to fear Yahweh your Elohim all the days. And if the way be too long for you, that you are unable to carry it, that is, you're unable to carry your tithe because you made so much crops, you had so much animals that you're going to give. For the place which Yahweh your Elohim will choose to establish his name therein is too far from you. For Yahweh your Elohim will bless you. Means that God has blessed you so much that your tithes is too much for you to carry and trek all the way to Jerusalem. What are you supposed to do? Verses 25 tells us, then you shall turn it into money. So sell the tithes into money so that you can bring the money with you to Jerusalem. And bind up the money in your hand, and you shall go to the place Yahweh your Elohim will choose. But don't bring the money. What should you do? Verse 26. And you shall turn that money into whatever your soul desires. What is it that you're supposed to turn that money into? It tells us cattle, sheep, new wine, or old wine. Meaning that because you're transporting this much cattle, this much crops, it's too much. The trek is too long. Take your tithe and then turn it into money. Sell it. Take the silver and then make your way to Jerusalem. When you get to Jerusalem, don't bring the money because tithe is not money. Take the money and buy the things that you sold to get the money. Cattle, sheep, old or new wine, or whatever your soul desires. And after you've given the part that you have to give to God, you sit down and then you eat the part that belongs to you. You eat it before Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. So clearly, when you had the opportunity to bring money as tithe, the text actually goes out of his way to tell you, no, take the money, turn it into what the tithe really constituted. Cattle, sheep, new wine, old wine, oil, crops, and bring that as your tithe, because the tithe had nothing to do with money, even though money was used in those days.